some other country. Maybe, I don't know.
I'm in Moscow. We are international.
International, okay.
Center is Artem in Sydney. Alexander was in Finland, but for now it's also in Sydney, and he's going to work for Florida University or University of Florida. I don't remember details.
Yeah. Okay. So international.
Also, we have someone from St. Petersburg, and our center is basically in St. Petersburg for now.
Yeah, international crowd, basically. Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
Also, we have Rustam Bargimov from Imperial College of London.
Oh, okay.
Let's start or wait somebody else?
You're asking me or?
Everyone.
I don't know. You tell me. If for me, we can wait. It's if you expect more people.
Can you try, please, sharing the screen now? Just
yeah,
to
sure.
check.
Let me see.
Yeah, we can wait a couple of, but it's already 5 past 2. So maybe I would say we could start because I mean it's cannot wait too long.
Okay, so let me see here. Let me just try to. I want to hide all this, stuff that comes up out of the sharing. So I'll start then, right? We start. Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Center of Econometrics and Business Analytics seminar series. Today we are having Emanuela Benincasa from University of Zurich with a talk about firms' losses and extreme weather events. So you have approximately 1 hour, and may we interrupt you during the talk?
Yeah. Sure. Of course. Yeah. So let's keep it interactive. I'd like that. So please interrupt me anytime if you have questions, if you have comments, suggestions, even for the paper, because we are still working on the paper. So I'm very much happy to present this the project today and hopefully collect suggestions. So, hi everyone. Thanks, Anton, for inviting me. So actually, Anton and I met in Milano during a conference and invited me to give a talk today. And this is a joint work with Frank Betz and Luca Gattini from the European Investment Bank. So they are affiliated at the economics department at the EIB. And the usual disclaimers apply in this case. So let me start by motivating our project. And as you can already sense from the title, this talk of today will be about extreme weather events. So extreme weather events, we have experienced, at least in the latest period, an increase in the amount of extreme weather events, both in terms of frequency and in terms of severity. And the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change basically recognized that greenhouse gas emissions are human-caused, and actually these human-caused greenhouse gas emissions led to an increase in frequency of some weather extreme since pre-industrial times. For example, let's think what happened last year with the European floods that affected the Benelux area, so Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg, and Netherlands, or also with the heat waves that affected Scandinavia in 2021, but also North America. For example, Canada last year experienced one of the highest temperature ever recorded, almost 40 degrees, which is abnormal. And also, if we think of what happened last year in 2021, where the wildfires across Southern Europe, for example, in Greece. So this is what we are observing nowadays and what we experience as human beings. And actually, in terms of severity, there has been scientists have calculated that the total losses of these extreme weather events account for 3.6 trillion, and also people are dying out of these events. So 2 million deaths due to extreme weather events over the period 1917-2019. So these are just some stylized facts of what we experienced. The question is, can we attribute extreme weather events to climate change, so to a changing climate, which we can also refer to this as global warming? So let's consider, for example, a very simple toy graph where we plot the temperatures, the distribution of temperature. Let's take, for example, the normal distribution. So on the x-axis, we have temperature, and on y-axis, the probability of occurrence of specific events, or maybe degrees. So if there is climate change and, of course, global warming, what we observe is that the average temperature can shift. And this, of course, shift also the case of specific extreme weather events, which comes out of the tail of the distribution of temperatures or climate. And extreme weather events are also the result of, in this case, would be also the result of warmer temperatures. So what have scientists recognized is that actually there is a link between climate change and extreme weather events, simply because with a shift in the average value of temperatures, there is also more likelihood that weather extremes can occur. And this is exactly what we have experienced, for example, last year, with a few stylized facts that I have explained.
Emanuela, can I ask?
Yeah.
Can I ask if, so the definition here is just the temperature changes. So things like earthquakes and related tsunamis and things of that nature are not considered, are they?
Yeah, no, they are not. So I would say more like, I mean, earthquakes are not usually defined under the definition of extreme weather events. So we can think about, for example, floods, or I don't know, heat waves, or maybe rainfall, heavy rainfall.
Okay. Then the second question is, how about the converse of a heat wave? And specifically, so you showed this distribution, but really this global warming is not always about extreme positive temperatures, but also extreme negative, right?
Yeah.
So it's really, it's not necessarily the shift, it's rather a mean preserving spread.
Yeah. So, it's true. I mean, this is just, very a toy graph to talk about. Let's consider the case of global warming. So the case of higher temperatures, right? The opposite will be, of course, let's consider a drop in a very heavy drop in the temperatures in terms of, I don't know, cold weather, right? In that case would be, I think, heavy, winter times. And actually, there is also research studying those cases as well, the case of the opposite in that sense. But in the aim of this graph is just to, have an idea of what can happen in terms of climate change affecting temperatures, both in the sense of higher temperatures and lower temperatures and the extremes. So, it's true. I mean, maybe I should update this graph to make it a little bit nicer. But yeah, I'm bringing up the case of global warming in this case. Yeah, thanks for the comment. So so basically the occurrence of extreme weather events is something that, I mean, that in terms of frequency, it's unprecedented, and in the sense of observed record, and will also increase with increasing global warming. And this is exactly what panelists have recognized, also scientists. And indeed, in the latest report given by the IPCC, so the 6th assessment report in 2021, these extreme weather events should concern heat waves, heavy rainfall, floods, storms, and droughts. So this is a few, again, events coming from severe weather. Now, what do we know in terms of research, and what we also don't know in terms of research when it comes to studying the impact of these events? So researchers so far have focused on trying to understand the macroeconomic effect of extreme weather events. So looking at the relation between weather extremes, in some cases natural disasters, and the effect on economic outcomes. In this case would be GDP. And what is recognized and it's established is that the occurrence of natural disasters in this case have a negative effect on economic growth. For example, after 10 years of the occurrence of the natural disaster, GDP per capita is lower by 10% on average. So this is in terms of long run effect. But also researchers agree on the fact that natural disasters have a short-term negative impact on economic growth as well. For example, they have found that in the same year as the year of the disaster occurrence, GDP per capita is lower by 6.83%. So in terms of effects of extreme weather events on economic growth, there are established facts. So the macro aspect has been studied. However, little is known when it comes to microeconomics aspects. So in terms of, for example, when we look the response of agents. In this case, little is known about firms' response to realization of extreme weather events. For example, how are firms, what is the response of firms in terms of investment activity? Are firms investing more, investing less? What type of investments are firms doing when there is the occurrence of an extreme weather events? And importantly, which one are firms' financing choices when it comes to experiencing this type of events? And what is the effect on both the asset and the liability side of a firm balance sheet? So this is something that is still understudied, although there is a very exploding literature on climate finance. I'll talk more about this, but this is something not studied so much. So what we do in our paper is to provide new evidence from the EBRD, EIB, World Bank enterprise surveys, which is a worldwide survey on businesses' experience. And we provide evidence with respect to this type of questions. And specifically what we do, we use a new and also unique module, which is part of the last round of the enterprise survey, which is the green module. And in this green module, we use all the questions included in this green module to study how companies cope with monetary losses due to extreme weather events. Specifically, what we do, we try to study the relation between losses induced weather extremes and the effect that they have on firms' balance sheet. Importantly, in our paper, we try to give and provide new evidence of what basically is the investment activity of firms, what is the impact on the balance sheet of these firms, and which one are the financing choices of firms, both in terms of bank and non-bank finance. This is something new that we provide in terms of contribution. And importantly, in terms of a model specification, we try to control for all possible confounding factors which can affect the outcome variables that I will show later by using a very saturated specification via inclusion of industry, size, country fixed effect. So basically what we study is the investment activity of firms located in the same country, which are of the same size and working in the same industry. So it's very tight. So this is in a nutshell what we do in our paper. And if there are no questions, I'll go on by talking about what we actually find. So which one are the main results of our paper? So when it comes to studying the asset side of a firm balance sheet, we find that firms experiencing losses due to extreme weather events have a greater likelihood to increase capital expenditure. So firms increase their investment activity. And I'll show you that the capital expenditure goes up and also a few type of investments that firms are more likely to engage. And importantly, we also find that firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events adopt measures which are aimed at reducing the environmental footprint of the establishment. So basically what they do, they decrease also I will show you that they decrease their CO2 emissions, but they also invest in assets which are kind of environmental friendly. When it comes to the liability side, we find that firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events are more likely to desire bank credit, so they increase their demand of bank finance. And conditional on having a positive demand for bank finance, they are more likely to show up at the bank and ask for a bank loan. So they are less likely to be discouraged from applying for a bank loan. However, when it comes to the loan application, these firms are also more likely to be rejected by the loan officer. So possibly because banks they find these firms as being more risky. And overall, we find that extreme weather losses basically are associated with a higher leverage for firms, which can, of course, have financial stability implications when it comes to this type of events. So this is, in a nutshell, a kind of a summary of our paper, so in terms of both results and story. But I'll go on giving you more details on what we have. And if there are no questions coming up,
how are they financing the capital expenditure then?
You mean in terms of financing choices, in terms of instruments?
Yeah. If the loan investment is less likely, but the desire to get credit more likely, and capital expenditure is rising, how is that coinciding?
Yeah, so I'll show you that basically we have a table with a bunch of estimations on different type of instruments, and maybe we can address this question that you have when I talk about this table, because I think it's easier to understand. Let's go there, and then if I'm not able to reply to this question, Artem, please interrupt me, and let's see if but we have a table when we look at this.
Yeah, sure, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so let me quickly talk about the contribution of our paper. So basically, our paper tries to fit in the climate finance literature, which is a very recent body of literature. And research, basically what researchers are trying to understand is what are the effects of climate risks on agents' response, both in terms of firms, banks, financial markets, and so on and so forth. So in terms of climate finance, the climate finance literature recognizes two types of climate risks. So we have transition risks and physical climate risks. So physical climate risks concerns the occurrence of extreme weather events, and indeed our paper tries to contribute to this side of the literature. So what we do is to study how firms respond to realization of physical climate risks. In this case, will be extreme weather events. And there are already papers studying both the asset and liability side, so both in terms of what is the performance or investment activity of firms, but also in terms of financing for this type of firms. For example, when it comes to the asset, researchers have shown that extreme weather events or natural disasters have an effect, a negative effect on the financing performance of firms. For example, the paper by Barot and Soagnat, or Pankratz and Schiller, which are very recent papers. But also Rao and co-authors show that when in the Indian setting where there is heavy rainfall, firms experiencing heavy rainfall actually increase their capital expenditure, and this increase occurs basically for 3 years lag. So we contribute to this body of research. And also when it comes to the liability, researchers have trying to understand what is the effect on firms' leverage, so in terms of debt that these firms have. And the agreement is that firms' leverage for after the occurrence of an extreme weather events on, in general, climate risks increase. We also try to contribute to the understanding of firms' access to credit and occurrence of physical climate risks. In general, the literature finds that firms, the occurrence of extreme weather events increase the demand of credit for firms, and also usually banks accommodate this type of demand. For example, Quaternot and Reibein, they find that after the Elbe flood in Germany, banks provide recovery lending to firms affected by this type of event. So we also try to contribute to this type of literature. So let me talk quickly about the data and methodology. So in terms of data, we use cross-sectional firm-level data from the 2018-2021 enterprise surveys, which is implemented jointly by the EBRD, EIB, and World Bank. So this is basically a worldwide survey that this institution jointly implement to basically collect information on businesses' experience when it comes to the environment where they live. So this type of data gives representative samples of an economy's formal private sector. And I'll show you later which type of countries we have in our sample. Basically, as I already anticipated during the introduction, the last wave of the enterprise surveys has a unique green economy module, which has this question about experiencing monetary losses due to extreme weather events. So what we do, we leverage this question to create our explanatory variable of interest, which we will call extreme weather loss. And specifically, the question is ask whether firms in the last 3 years with respect to the fiscal year of reference have experienced monetary losses due to extreme weather events, such as storm, floods, droughts, or landslide. So basically, this is a yes or not question, and we create out of this question a dummy variable, which is equal to 1 if firms experience losses due to extreme weather events, or 0 otherwise. So this will be the main variable of interest that we have in our specification. Our estimation sample includes roughly 24,000 firms, so establishment, in 41 countries worldwide. And these firms are actually mostly unlisted firms, so they are not public firms. So the type of financing that they get, it's mostly bank finance or usually internal funds. And indeed, these firms are, the majority of these firms are in developing or emerging economies. So this is something nice in terms of when it comes to this type of data, because usually what we see in the literature is basically studies in developed economies. So we try to understand also what is happening for these firms in these countries, which usually are also more exposed to climate change. So in this slide, you see basically the breakdown of countries that we have in our sample. Mostly these countries are located in Central Eastern Europe, in Asia, or North Africa, basically. And we have 41 countries, which are all listed on the x-axis, while on the y-axis, we see the percentage of firms that experience a monetary loss due to extreme weather events. The red line gives basically the average number of firms that experience monetary losses due to extreme weather events in our sample, which is roughly 9%. And if you think this is a high number, and we can also see that there is variation across countries when it comes to the number of firms, the percentage of firms that are exposed to this type of events and that actually experience losses due to extreme weather events. So there are countries like Greece, Malta, Moldova, which are at which are those that with the highest percentage, while other countries like Turkey, Egypt, Russia, indeed, which are on the other side. So this is the type of kind of variation which we like in our specification, because this shows that for each country there are differences in terms of response. We also look at the spatial correlation of losses due to extreme weather events. So we try to understand if there is correlation in terms of firms that are located in a specific circle, and what is the response that other firms gives in terms of losses due to extreme weather events. So for example, on the x-axis here, you see the distance from the nearest neighbor in terms of firm that are there in a specific circle in terms of kilometers, while on the y-axis we see the fraction of firms that are actually replying and saying, yes, we experienced a loss due to extreme weather events. And in some sense, this is decreasing in terms of distance with respect to the nearest firm that actually replies, yes, we experience a loss due to extreme weather events. So the correlation is kind of decreasing in terms of space. Now, when it comes to the methodology, what we do is to run a set of regression, specifically sample-weighted linear probability models, because we have, thanks to this survey, we have our outcome variables are mostly dummy variables. So what you can see is that extreme weather loss, it's our independent variable of interest, which is a dummy variable equal to 1 if the firm declares losses due to extreme weather events and 0 otherwise. We saturate our model, including firm level controls, to try to absorb all observable firm level heterogeneity. The outcome variables are a set of variables which try to measure the investment activity and the financing choices of these firms. And importantly, what we do in our regression is to include an industry size location fixed effect. So what this fixed effect does is to basically absorb all the heterogeneity for all firms which are located in the same country, of the same size, so we'll have small, medium, and large, and which are part of the same industry. So this is kind of pretty granular, so we get rid of all this type of co-founding variables, together with having a set of control variables in the regression. And finally, we estimate robust standard errors by clustering them at the within country regional level. So this will be our treatment level. Now I'll jump to the results. So in this slide, you see the main results coming from our study when we look at the capital expenditure of firms. So column 1 shows the basically the likelihood that a firm would purchase fixed assets, so increase the amount of fixed assets in terms of investments. And we see that basically losses due to extreme weather events is associated to a probability of investing in fixed assets by 6 percentage points, which actually corresponds to 16% of the relative sample mean. And usually this refers to physical capital, of course. We also look at the type of investments in terms of physical assets, both land and buildings or investments in machinery and equipment. And in both cases, we find that firms are more likely to acquire new lands or new buildings, but also they are more likely to acquire machinery and equipment if they experience a loss due to extreme weather events. So there is association going on. Because of the type of question we consider, basically ask if firms experienced a loss due to extreme weather events in the 3 years prior to the fiscal year of reference. We try to address concerns related to this type of gap in terms of window and the fiscal year of reference we consider by looking at investments in fixed assets in the year prior to the fiscal year of reference. And we still find that actually in that window, firms are likely to purchase physical capital. And finally, we look at the intensive margin of capital expenditure by studying the amount of investments scaled by the firm size. And we find that firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events is associated to 25 percentage points increase in terms of amount in this type of investments. So the question is why this is happening? In our paper, we do not try to pin down a mechanism because of the type of data we have. But of course, we can of course argue why this is happening. And the fact that we find an association between extreme weather losses and capital expenditure can be due to two reasons. For example, firms that experience this type of losses may seek to replenish the stock of capital because the stock of capital can be damaged. Or maybe firms engage in this type of investments because they want to guard for the future when it comes to future realization of physical climate risks. So this is something that we conjecture as possible reason why this can happening.
But look, so there is the theory of the firm, right? And it suggests that there are internal processes for the growth of the firm, decisions whether to invest or redistribute as profits, right? And they have to do with profitability, with productivity. They have to do with form of ownership, because public versus private, and whether there's it depends on the dividend policy, it depends on all kinds of other things that seem to be confounding here, right? So I wonder what are those axes that you're controlling for?
You mean in terms of firm controls? So let me go back. Maybe I can show you this summary stats here, where we have the type of controls. So basically we look for, you can consider the type of control starting from this line, audited. So we control for if the firm is externally audited by a third party, if firms are sole proprietorship, if they are publicly listed, which corresponds to 6% of the sample, if they are in partnership, if they work in the local market, if they are exporter. We also control for the age, and we control for the fact that if they have a website, because these firms most of them can be also located in remote areas. So having a website can proxy for the technology that they have in place. And we control if the CEO is female and for the years of experience of the manager. So this is the set of controls that we have in the sample. But I think you were referring to another set of variables, right? Maybe?
Well, partly this answers the question because it has the ownership structure, but
yeah, okay.
Fundamentally, it is the decision about how you redistribute profits of the company, right? So if it's
For example, if it's public, the dividends policy or something like this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the revenue, if there is revenue, it gets redistributed, and there are decisions on how, right, whether it's reinvested in capital stock or whether it's paid out as a dividend, or it's retained as profit.
Yeah. But I think this we can address with this type of control, right? If they are publicly listed, this type of concern, I believe. Actually, I should check in the data. I think with this type of control, we can control for this, but still, maybe I can look in the data if we have this type of information in the survey. So if we
well, you do have this the main factors, right? So you have the capital in the form of fixed assets, land. There's probably some measure of labor as well, somewhere here. Maybe that could work through, I don't know, machinery or the equipment use.
You mean in terms of decision for investing? Yeah.
Yeah, because the ultimate point here is that the firms make these decisions if it's not related to weather, right? I mean, they make these decisions about the level of capital to acquire to match a certain cost or profit, or both cost and profit, optimizing strategies, right? So growth strategies.
Yeah.
So that there would be an optimal combination of capital, labor, land that is needed to produce a given output, and you target that output. There's an optimal ratio for these inputs, and if you are out of that ratio, then you go out and buy more. So that's what determines it, right? Rather than of course, if your extreme weather event caused some of your inputs to be out of this optimal proportion, then that's what you want to determine, right? So ultimately, I guess the question is whether you get a measure of optimality here for the inputs that the companies use, and whether the extreme weather causes the companies to get out of that optimality.
Okay. So, but yeah, I mean, in terms of thinking, like in terms of, I mean, I see the point. I see, and if I understand correctly, you are concerned in terms of omitted variables, right? Or maybe in terms of policy of the firm. So what is the policy of each firm in terms of growth, right? Which
but it's to an extent it answers this question, right? Because you have the form of ownership and you have some of the inputs in it. So what you can do is include those inputs in various forms. You can include them lagged, right? You can include the ratios to capture the optimality, right? If the ratio is out of a proportion, then in the following period, it will have the effect. But what's missing here, it seems, is so there's the capital, land, machinery, but labor component seems to be completely out of the picture at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I took note of this, and I think we can do this because it should be part of. I mean, it's for sure labor in terms of employees and stuff. There is a module on employees as well, so we can do something there. Yeah. Thanks for the comment. Thanks. I took note of that. So basically, this is what we have when it comes to capital expenditure. We also...
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So your regression is contemporaneous, right? So you're both fixed assets and extreme weather loss, it's of the same year. Is that correct?
No, it's as I explained before. So basically there is a 3 years of window. So the survey is structured in a way that each question is asked with reference to the fiscal year, the last completed fiscal year. But then this question asks whether in the last 3 years, compared to the considering the last complete fiscal year, these firms have experienced this type of events. So there is some kind of 3 years window. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. But again, we try to address this with this, what we do in column 4 here, by looking also at fixed assets in year prior to the completed fiscal year. So we try to do something.
Yeah, no, actually, I was actually thinking the other way around. So the firm which experienced the losses over the last 3 years, will it increase its fixed assets in the forthcoming year? So that's the reaction, no? Like what you're looking for is that the firms, they experience the losses over the past period and they react in the future. So it's not the T-1, it's rather for me T+1.
Yeah, no, sure. The thing is that we do not know the year where exactly this happened. We can just approximately give an approximation by looking at the last complete fiscal year. Of course, with the type of regression we have, this can happen, for example, 2 or 3 years before with respect to the fixed assets acquired in the last complete fiscal year. So in some sense, we are doing what you are saying. Although it's a bit, I agree, because of this window, we cannot say this precisely, but actually, in some sense, gives an idea of what happens later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe you will say it later, but do you look also at some sort of, if they have reduced profits or retained earnings or... Okay.
Yeah, we look at the return in the internal funds. Yes, we look at this. We have a table again on this, but let me go there and maybe let's see.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay, so quickly, we also look at the green investment activity. So we have a bunch of questions on whether, again, from the survey, whether the firm, the managers declares that actually the firm invested in measures that reduce the environmental footprint of the company. And we see that firms experiencing losses due to extreme weather events increase the likelihood to invest in this type of measures. We also look at the heterogeneity of type of manager of the firm. Is the manager an old manager or a young manager? And we see that actually this probability of investing in green measures, green assets, we can also call them, decrease with the increase in age of the firm, so basically of the manager. So with increase in the case, with respect to the case that the manager of the firm is an old manager. So it looks like that old managers are reluctant to invest in green assets or green technologies, which actually reduce the footprint of the environmental footprint of the firm. We do the same exercise just as a comparison to look at the fixed assets, and we indeed do not find anything there. So this is like it's helpful for us with respect to this type of argument. And finally, because of, again, we cannot pin down the exact mechanism, we question, okay, why this is happening? Why it's the case that a firm that experiences losses due to extreme weather events would increase investments in green measures? And this can be due to two reasons. Because of, for example, the vintage effects in more modern equipment. So the idea is that the current equipment, in terms of machinery, it's more efficient in terms of pollution, for example. And that's why maybe the firm declares this. Or simply because the experiencing a losses due to extreme weather events make firms establishment more aware of climate change, and that's why they decide to do so. So we try to answer this, to try to understand if this is the case by looking at CO2 monitoring of, so CO2 emissions monitoring of each firm. So if you think emitting carbon emissions comes as a kind of free, right? So monitoring is a kind of cost for the firm. And indeed, we find that experiencing losses due to extreme weather events is associated with higher likelihood to monitor CO2 emissions. So it's likely that this comes from a kind of awareness angle. When we look at access to credit, we find that basically firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events have higher demand for bank credit. And this corresponds to 12 percentage points. The effect actually is also economic meaningful because it corresponds to 28% relative to the sample mean, higher demand for bank credit. So if firms increase their demand of credit, so they are more willing to get bank loans basically as a finance source. We also look at firms' credit constraints and discouragement and rejection of their loan application. So let me go to column 3. And what we actually find is that conditional on needing a loan, so we can see this by looking at the drop of the observations, extreme weather, so firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events are less likely to be discouraged and showing up at the bank and ask for a bank loan. But at the same time, these banks are actually more likely to reject their loan application. And possibly because again, we do not pin down the mechanism, but this is possibly because this type of firms are defined by the bank as more risky. Actually, there is also research showing that this can be the case, that firms exposed to climate change are perceived by the bank more risky, and banks usually also increase loan terms, change the loan terms of a loan. Yes,
can
please.
Yeah, a question.
Yeah, sure.
Why won't you use the interaction terms? So why do you constrain your sample to affected firms and then you do the regressions instead of using maybe the interaction, the extreme weather loss times credit need or maybe actually something that you could look at is the interaction of extreme weather loss times leverage, or the loss, the loss of the firms and your loss is just 0-1 variable, right? It's not the amount that the firm.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know the amount, unfortunately. We just know if they experience that. But
maybe still you can do some sort of an interaction variable.
Yeah, so actually what we did, I remember a long time back, we looked at, we use credit constraint as an outcome variable, and we run an exercise with interaction variables, discouraged and rejected. So we did this type of exercise, but we did not find anything there. So there was no difference. But just to see basically if there is heterogeneity in terms of this type of variables, yeah.
Yeah, no, because you're just saying that the firms, they may be more rejected. And the leverage could be one of the reasons, right? So what is the relationship? Like firms which have high leverage, so in a way they're already financially vulnerable, and then they experience weather loss. So how they are affected? Like, can they cope with this? Like, do they have more problems of getting a loan? I think that would be interesting to look at.
Yeah. Yes, we need to create some measure of leverage, but no, actually we have it in. I'll show this in the upcoming tables. But yes, maybe we can do this. Thanks for the comment. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, because just to mention, I think this is really interesting because we have a paper where we look at if more leveraged firms have problems in adjusting to the carbon tax in the ETS, European European carbon tax trading system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we find this non-linear effects of on average firms under certain threshold, they have used the credit to transition, so to reduce their carbon emissions. But if they're too leveraged, then they have problems in transitioning because they can't use this money for improving their processes. They use more leverage in order to serve their own debts.
Okay.
So and I was thinking like your analysis in some ways, maybe like complementary.
Yeah. Can you please share your paper with me? Maybe I'm happy to do that. Yeah, because maybe we
I will. I can find your email and I will send you the paper.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. So maybe for the interest of time, because I think I'm a little bit out of time, I believe. So let me go to this table, which is actually the table that hopefully will answer a few questions that I've got so far on the financing choices of firms. So basically, the enterprise surveys, it's very complete in terms of questions to the firm when it comes to financial instruments that they decide to use to both finance investments, so physical investments in physical capital, and also finance working capital, so short-term financing. So this is something like that we try to exploit in our paper and hopefully try to complement research that has been done so far by both looking at bank credit, but also other types of instruments like non-bank credit, trade finance, and also government grants. So let me start by commenting the table that you see, panel A table, so the table at the upper level in the upper part of the slide. So what we do here is to study how firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events decide to finance the investments of in their physical capital. So which type of instruments they use. So column 1 shows study the case where a firm decide to use internal funds. So firms that are actually not leveraged. So firms that use retained earnings or equity injection to finance physical capital, so acquisition of fixed assets. And what we can see is that these type of firms are actually more likely to be leveraged because of there is a reduction in the probability of using internal funds, of only using 100% using this type of financing. So this is a nice evidence in the sense that extreme weather loss increase the probability that a firm is more leveraged. We also look at the case of bank credit, non-bank credit and trade credit, and we find that actually these type of firms are more likely to use bank finance, but also trade finance to finance this type of investments. We do not find statistically significant coefficients on non-bank credit and government grants. And finally, what we do is because of this set of regressions are regression which study the extensive margin, we also look at the intensive margin. So we construct a variable which study the ex post usage of internal funds to finance fixed assets acquisitions. So what we see is that extreme weather loss is associated with a decrease in use of internal funds by 5.2 percentage points. So basically less equity injections and less retained earnings to finance this type of assets. We also look at the case of working capital, by splitting the sample in the subsample of firms that have fixed assets, so they have made a fixed investments, and those that do not have made any type of investments, but they just require financing for short-term operations, so for the financing of working capital. So what we observe in column 1 is that these two type of firms, they are both, again, less likely to use internal funds. So in this case, they are more likely to be leveraged and when it comes to the financing of working capital. The results are also confirmed when it comes to bank credit. So most likely firms use bank credit, bank loans to finance working capital. Finally, we find that there is mild evidence on non-bank credit for firms that have investments. But interestingly, we also find that firms that invest in fixed assets are also more likely to increase the use of government grants to finance working capital, possible because they face lower finance, and they also use this type of instrument for this purpose. And finally, results are also confirmed when it comes to studying the intensive margin. So in a nutshell, what we observe is that overall firms are more levered, and what they do, they use more bank credit, but also in some cases trade credit to finance their investments and their working capital. And on average, again, results are confirmed when we look at the intensive margin and not only to the extensive margin. So let me try to also talk about some robustness that we have in the paper. So what we do is to do two types of falsification tests. The first one is where we use payments of bribes by firms, so informal payments, as a liquidity shock for the firm. So the idea is that what we conjecture is that firms that are exposed to the payments of bribes, actually they experience some kind of liquidity shock, which is out of their decisions, right? And if this type of payments, shocks, or in some sense losses are associated with, at least they should not be associated with both corporate investments and hopefully access to credit. So we tried to do this type of test, and we did find that informal payments is not associated with fixed assets and all these other types of corporate investments. There is mild evidence for land and buildings, but it's very mild. And finally, we also find that payments of bribe increase the demand for the demand for bank credit, so it triggers liquidity needs. But actually, we do not find anything on the discouragement. We find a very mild, statistically significant coefficient on rejection, which is actually also in line with what has been showed in the literature, that banks know that these type of firms are exposed to this type of liquidity shock, and therefore they are more likely to reject loan applications. But overall, we do not find any association with investments activity, which helps us in the argument that our variable extreme weather loss is actually associated and triggers capital expenditure. Another exercise that we do is to basically use the panel subsample that we have in the enterprise survey. So what we do is to basically use all the questions that are part of the 2013 version of the enterprise surveys, which, however, does not allow us to know if actually firms experience losses due to extreme weather events, because in that type of wave, there is no green module, so we do not know if these firms experience losses due to extreme weather events. So what we do is to basically assign a fake extreme weather loss for this type of year, and study the association with capital expenditure and also access to credit. And what we can see is that when we do this falsification test, we do not find any results when it comes to acquisition of fixed assets, land and buildings, and machinery and equipment. So this is helping us for the exogeneity of our main variable. And also, we do not find anything when it comes to the case of demand for bank credit, credit constraint, discouragement, and rejection. So this falsification test is a nice robustness check that we do to, argue on the exogeneity, hopefully, of our variable extreme weather loss. And Anton, how much time do I have? Just to...
I think you have a couple of minutes.
Okay. So let me discuss the last robustness that we do. So because of, again, the enterprise survey has many questions, we are also able to know which one are, the management practices of the firm in terms of monitoring, investments, and so on and so forth. So, however, this type of practices, this type of questions are asked only to a subsample of firms, so SMEs. And what we do is to try to control for this variable in our specifications for the subset of firms that are actually subject to this type of questions. And luckily, also our results survive when we control for management practices, both in the case of corporate investments and in the case of access to credit. Although the number of observations decrease. So let me conclude. So what we do in our paper is to try to study the investment activity and the financing choices of firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events. And our data tells us that a significant share of firms is already suffering losses due to extreme weather events, and this corresponds to an average of 9%. What we find is that these firms are more likely to invest in fixed assets, so they increase their capital expenditure. And this can be due to the fact that firms want to replenish the damaged stock of capital, or simply because they want to guard against future climate risks. We also find some association between firms that experience losses due to extreme weather events and investments in green assets, possibly because these firms increase their awareness in climate change. And finally, firms are more likely to increase bank credit. They are also less likely to be discouraged and show up and ask for a bank loan, but actually these banks are more likely to to basically reject their loan application. And overall, we find that these firms have a higher exposed leverage, which can, of course, have some financial stability implications and limit the ability of these firms to invest in the future. So thanks for listening, and very happy to collect questions.
Thank you, Emanuela.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, if...
Can I ask?
Yeah,
that's just pure speculation. So this is just one shot, right? Because one thing I was thinking about is some sort of contagion, well, information contagion or anticipation. So if firms, they're located like close enough to each other, though some set of firms are affected and the others are not affected. So I was wondering, like, would these firms which are located in the same area but were not affected would react in a similar way to the affected firms. So then meaning anticipating this, the future weather losses. I understand you can't do it, right?
No, I mean, we can, but basically just by taking the share of firms that do not experience losses due to extreme weather events and which are close to the ones that actually declare to have experienced a loss, right? But this is another paper, I believe. So it's some other different research question, right? So basically the spillover effects of experiencing losses due to extreme weather events on the investment decisions of this type of firms, right? This is what you are thinking about, isn't it? Yeah. So
exactly.
I think it's interesting. We thought about this at some point, but I also believe that this would be some nice research question to investigate, another type of research question, and which, by the way, researchers have shown that extreme weather events have spillover effects on agents that are in the neighborhood. So, but yeah, would be interesting. It's just that a bit different from what we do. But thanks.
And I liked your, I liked in general the paper and the results, but I also particularly like this green model and that the firms take into account and this reducing CO2 emissions. And,
yeah, thanks.
This is really nice result.
Thanks. I'll please send me the paper you mentioned that you're working on the ATS.
Yeah, we'll do. We can also discuss separately.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, would be nice. I don't think there are other questions, Anton. I don't think there are more questions, I believe. Right?
Yeah, hi. Okay, so we can stop the recording. Thank you, Emanuela.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for all the comments. I signed everything. Like I wrote down everything. So thanks a lot. So